This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis Now, we bring you a discussion on GST, 1 year of growth, simplicity and transparency. The participants are Arun Goyal, Special Secretary GST Council, and Santosh Tiwari, journalist.
As GST completes 1 year today, Union Cabinet Minister Mr. Arun Jaitley, who has been leading introduction of the reform from the very beginning, very rightly pointed out in the government celebration event that initially everybody thought that this would be a disruptive reform. And after 1 year, it has turned out to be a reform whose implementation has been very smooth. And this credit completely goes to the GST Council, to the officials who have successfully implemented this reform, because in other countries, GST indeed had been disruptive. In India, it has been a smooth process. Everybody is happy that at least the way GST has been implemented, it gives a lot of optimism that going ahead, it will not only bring in a lot of revenue to the states and to the center, but will also bring in a system, an ecosystem where ease of doing business for the industry and for common man, a reasonable rate structure in terms of indirect taxes will come in this year or maybe going ahead. We have with us Mr. Arun Goyal leading this whole exercise when the GST was implemented. Well, sir, this has been a great experience for everyone, for industry, for common man, for government officials, for politicians, because this reform in India is now symbolized by a consensual approach. How do you sum up this exercise after 1 year?
No, you have rightly put it that initially everyone was quite apprehensive, and this was mainly because what we learned from the other countries, that when a reform of this magnitude or such a transformation nature is taking place, so there could always be disruption and there could be initial difficulties. But somehow, like you have pointed out, this has been very, very smooth in India, and the main credit for this goes to the finance ministers of the 29 states, plus finance ministers of 2 union territories with legislatures, and of course the statesmanship and the leadership that has been shown by our Union Cabinet Minister Mr. Jaitley. I think he played a very, very crucial role, and he made sure that all the decisions in the council are taken by consensus. And there were, I wouldn't say that contentious issues. There were contentious issues, but then they were debated upon. In many cases, debates went on for hours together, and he was very, very open. In fact, the opportunity was even given to the smallest of the states, and in case they had a point to make, so they were given the opportunity to make point. I think that has been a major reason that we've been able to roll out it in a very smooth fashion. And after the implementation started, so there were difficulties, and GST Council was very open to the feedback. It was very, very agile. As you know that we have had totally 27 meetings till now, and many meetings have taken place after it was rolled out. So based on the feedback that we received from trade, industry, other stakeholders, then the decisions were taken. Just I can give an example that initially our return process was to consist of 3 returns, GSTR 1, 2 and 3. But considering the difficulties that were being faced, one simplified return, that is we call it a GSTR 3B, was started. And again, the whole council, everyone agreed that in the initial years of the launch, we have to see to it that the compliance is simple and straightforward. So that is why the GST 3B return was started.
Initially, we started GST with rates which were more or less similar in terms of incidence to the earlier structure. Excise structure at the central level and sales VAT structure at the states level. And we started with the administrative process, which was more or less similar to the existing one, the earlier one. But going forward, as you said, that at least in the first year, we have simplified the return filing structure, although a new return filing structure has been basically brought into place, which has to be implemented. So in terms of administrative reforms going ahead, the GST Council and also the government, central government needs to do certain things. But in terms of rate, I'll come first. Taking into account some of the questions raised in public, some rates have been rationalized. And more or less, as in terms of structure, that which items should have tax incidence at a lower rate and which items should have a higher rate, the tax structure is now there. But still, there are items which are out of GST net, like real estate or petroleum or alcohol. And expansion-wise also you need to do certain things so that you expand the base, although right now whatever base you have is quite good in the first year. So how do you think this process now moving forward next year in terms of rates?
I think in today's celebrations, our ministers spoke at length on this issue. We are really looking forward to stabilization of the revenues before any further decisions are taken on further rationalization in the rates. The first thing is that when initially the rates were set or the different commodities were fitted into different slabs, so it was seen that they were more or less what was the existing rate, so we fit into that category. But then going forward, as you would know, that number of products, number of commodities have been rationalized, and if you remember, there was a meeting in November in Guwahati where large number of products at one go were brought down from 28% to 18%. So that was a massive change that was made. And similarly, there have been a number of other products which have been brought from say 18 to 12 or 12 to 5%. So if you look at the structure now, 95% of the items, they are below 18% or at 18%. And in most of the cases, the incidence of taxation is less than what was prevailing before. And so one of the major things that we've been able to achieve by this and having this multiple rate structure is that there has been no inflation in implementation of the GST. So wherever other countries the GST has been implemented, so we have seen that there has been some sort of inflation, and this was also a worry over here also. But because of this rate structure and making sure that whatever items are there of the consumer price index, which constitute the consumer price index, so they were fitted either into the 0% exempted category or in the 5% category. So we have seen that during the implementation of the GST, there has been no inflation at all. As regards other products, you have said that there are 5 petroleum products and then real estate and alcohol which are outside the GST at present. As regards the 5 petroleum products are there, it is for the GST Council to decide at what time they have to be brought into GST. So we don't have to go for the constitutional amendment, but on the other hand, as and when the Council decides, so they can be brought into the GST structure. But it is totally on the hands of the Council to take a decision, and like it was made in the celebrations today, so it is all depends upon how our revenue streams play in the short run. And in case we really see a lot of buoyancy taking place in the revenues, so it will be for the GST Council to take a call on it.
And then one issue which has been there and which has been seen by the industry as a challenge, that is return filing process. Finance Minister Piyush Goyal today said that probably for the composition scheme for the smaller players, we can have even instead of quarterly returns, we should have one yearly return. That may not be possible at this juncture. This can be taken forward, and this can be taken forward as a proposal for some time ahead. But as you see it today, the new return filing process has been proposed. Now, stakeholders, the industry chambers, in the small players, they appear to be a little bit apprehensive on this. How should the government go about this, or the GST Council go about this?
Broad principles of the simplified return, they have already been decided by the GST Council, and the whole idea is that there should be only single return and the whole process should be very simple. To meeting that objective, so there have been number of meetings, not only with the stakeholders but also with the IT experts, to see to it that whichever new system that we design is user friendly. And when we implement this system, and this system is developed by the GST, and so we decided that there will be a period of transition where this invoice matching would be taking place, but gradually they would also be allowed to take provisional credit. But then after that transition period, it would be totally that as and when the invoices are filed by the supplier, that the buyers would be able to take a credit. So it's a very simplified process which has been designed after a lot of consultation, and adequate time is being given to the GST to prepare the software, and I don't think that there would be any problem, and because it's based on the stakeholders' feedback.
Apart from raising revenue from indirect taxes, transparency in the system, which will in effect lead to less and less tax evasion in the system. In the first year, do you see that particular process happening in the country?
There have been estimates made by the Chief Economic Advisor regarding the revenues, So as per the revenues which have been collected in the 9 months period of the last financial year, it has been around 8.2 lakh crores. So if we annualize it, it becomes 11 lakh crore. So that is approximately 11.2% growth over the previous financial year. So which is a very good growth considering there were initial glitches and initial difficulties also. And secondly, that we have actually brought down the rates for number of products. So many of the products where the incidence of tax before the GST was in the range of 28% or 30%, so they have been brought to the 18%. So we have seen a growth of about 11.9% in the revenues of last year. So to that extent, GST has already stabilized and the revenues are showing a growth. And now with the introduction of the e-way bill system, we see that it will be a sort of a anti-evasion tool whereby it will become increasingly difficult for a person to evade taxes, and that would also lead to increased tax base and buoyancy in the revenues.
Goods and services tax has to be seen in the context of one nation, one tax. After 1 year, do you think that most of the taxes which were there at the state level have been subsumed in the GST structure, or there are still taxes which need to be brought into GST structure?
I think whatever taxes were to be subsumed, they have already been subsumed into the GST. In fact, the base level on which government is giving them 14% growth on a nominal basis, so that is after taking into account all the taxes which have already been subsumed. So that is around, we say that 17 taxes and 23 cesses. So that is a broad kind of a picture. These are the taxes and the cesses of both central and the state government which have been subsumed into the GST.
And there has been one question on administration, the jurisdiction part of it, in terms of GST collection.
I would say that this implementation of GST is not only an economic reform, but also a major administrative reform. And I say this for the reason that even though the two taxes are being concurrently levied, that is the central GST and the state GST, but the taxpayer has only to approach one tax authority. Firstly, the taxpayer did not go to any tax authority because the whole system is IT enabled, right from registration, filing return, payment of taxes, taking refund. It's all IT and IT enabled. So he need not have any interface with the tax authority. Even if he has to have an interface, and that would be in a very, very rare cases whether your case comes for scrutiny. So in that case, he has to go to only one tax authority. And for this, what we have done is that we have cross-empowered the officers. That is to say that the central government officers, they've been cross-empowered to also act under the state government acts. Similarly, the state government officers have been empowered to act under the central government. Because of this cross-empowerment, taxpayers will have to go to only one tax authority, and whatever taxpayers were there, they have been divided between the central and the state government. So essentially what we say, the taxpayer would have single interface.
Clearly, GST in its first year shows that India is capable of handling reforms of this nature. It's a seamless tax structure for the industry, and this seamless structure is expected to lead to higher revenues. What kind of revenue growth you see with GST in coming years?
What we are targeting for this financial year is, we say, around 1 lakh crore on an average per month. This target seems to be achievable considering what we have seen, the revenue growth for the month of March anyway, which is a little aberration from the normal months. So we had quite good revenue, and then later on last month we had around 94,000 crores, and Finance Secretary had mentioned that even for the current month it is something touching around 96,000 crores. So the revenue growth has been there, and now after e-way bill we definitely see more revenue growth, and we should be able to meet the target of 1 lakh crore per month for the financial year.
Thank you very much, sir, for participating in this discussion.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on GST, 1 year of growth, simplicity and transparency. The participants were Arun Goyal, Special Secretary, GST Council, and Santosh Tiwari, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.